Good morning and welcome to episode 8 of the Finding My Path podcast, or not really podcast, I guess, but of our Facebook Live series. And this morning we are talking about getting real. And this is about getting real feedback, but I think that's an important part of a follow-up to earlier this week about being transparent rather than spinning. So part of where we spin in life is that we tend to spin not only to others but to ourselves. We tend to convince ourselves of things that we wish were true but aren't necessarily. So getting real feedback, at least for me, has become just a critical part of my life. And it was something that earlier in my life I was very defensive about, very frustrated about, and kind of it just pushed away. And now it's something for the last few years that I've actively sought. I go and seek people out and ask them for the hard truth, ask them for the things that I don't necessarily want to hear, but I need to hear that will help me get better. So we'll talk more about that in just a few minutes. In the meantime, I want to share a little bit more of what's going on in my world. And just a lot of exciting stuff going on right now. I'm very, very happy to share with you. And some of this is with clients. Some of it is with what's going on just for some of the different pieces of goals that I have, a couple things that I'm struggling with, all the things that I've promised that I will share with you episode after episode. Before I get into any of that, just a quick shout out and happy birthday to my dad today. He's a good guy. He turned 70 today, and we had a great party for him a couple of weeks ago to celebrate that one of his amazing friends put together. But happy birthday to my dad. Then as I step back today, I got to tell you, I'm feeling a little tired. I was up until 3:30 working this morning, just excited to get things done, to make progress, found some clarity and some quiet while everyone else was asleep and got it done. I should add a little caveat here that I don't encourage that necessarily. As much as I'm a night owl, and I'm a night owl as much as night owls can be, I don't necessarily encourage you to consistently skip a bunch of sleep. I spent a lot of years as a sleep warrior, as a guy who slept 3 hours a night and then 4.5 hours a night. And I was one of the more effective, productive people I knew. But as it turns out, I didn't know what I was missing. Once I started Leaders Must Lead, I recognized that I had a chance to test out what everyone was saying about how valuable sleep might be. So I slept all that I wanted for a few months. When I did, my body settled out to wanting to be in bed for about 7.5 hours. It's really sleeping for maybe 6.5 to 7. And I found something very interesting. I found that I gave up that 20 hours maybe of time a week to get me in bed a little bit longer. But I actually was getting as much done in 40 hours then as I had been in 70 prior to that, even though I'd been effective all along. So it really hit me that as much as I had worn it as a badge of honor to not sleep or not need sleep, that there was an impact that I didn't even realize. So while I will tell you I was up last night and I was tired, my goal is going to be to get back to my 7 or 7.5 hours tonight. I think that's a good thing to keep in mind, is that you may not realize what you're missing when you're not sleeping. Now, some people absolutely realize what they're missing when they're not sleeping. My wife and my boy realize it very fast. They are night owls, but they're not me in terms of being able to survive on an amount of sleep. I just don't necessarily recommend it. So time management, so sleep is an important part. The receiving feedback piece is something that is tough, right? Getting feedback and asking for feedback, not just getting it, not just when people bring it to us, but actively going and asking someone, hey, tell me what I don't want to hear. Tell me the hard stuff. And that can be pretty hard. That can be pretty emotionally difficult, especially if we are, as I often have been, pretty naturally insecure, pretty naturally maybe struggling with wanting to do so well and wanting to please everyone and wanting everyone to be happy, that I can judge and evaluate that in so many ways, in the little voices in my head that tell me that I'm not great or that I'm underserving people. So there are a few suggestions that I have for you that have worked for me that I wanted to share this morning just about the idea of receiving feedback. One of them is to build a culture of trust around you, to get people around you who you can trust, who you can count on. Get people around you who think that this is, I find these are related. When I have people around me, whether they work for me or work with me, or whether they're just people that are friends of mine, I look for people who have ideas, who are willing to share a real opinion, but also who have a common goal of mine, who want me to succeed, who want us to succeed together. I find that when I have that, it's easier to take the feedback that they'll give, and their feedback tends to be a bit more insightful. This goes a little back to the idea that when we are around people, we become a little bit like them. I pretty strongly believe that we become the average of the 5 people we spend the most time around. So if I can spend time around people who have my best interest at heart, but also who are very good at things I want to be good at, then I can trust that feedback to be quality feedback, and I can trust their heart to be in the right place. It takes down some of those defensive walls for me. And that's the second tip, is to try to avoid defensiveness. I think it's pretty natural when you have someone saying, "Hey, you didn't do that very well," or that you have a problem in this area, or here's something you're not aware of. It's pretty natural to be and to feel defensive. It is. I think it's tough to avoid any feeling of that. But how you respond matters. And it matters a great deal, because if you come across as defensive, you might get the feedback a couple of times, but then you're going to have people who are feeling shut down. They're like, well, I don't want to give feedback to that person. I don't want to share that idea with that person, because they're just going to get upset. And they either don't want to hurt your feelings, or they don't want to deal with the drama, or whatever it might be. So then they don't feel comfortable sharing. So take those steps to avoid defensiveness. For me, I find that there are a couple of ways that I try to do that. One is that if I'm asking for the feedback, I kind of prepare myself ahead of time. I take some breaths, and I just think, don't say anything unless it's a question. Take a breath before you say anything, before you respond to that feedback. And I find that helps a little bit. If it is uninvited feedback, I still want it, because now it's someone who wasn't even asked for it, but feels the courage and ability to share. Hopefully they're not just an internet troll throwing stuff out there because they're trying to be mean. And you do have to have a little bit of a filter in those situations. But the idea there is that I have this person coming, and I want to try to listen. The biggest thing is maybe to avoid responding at all while they are talking. Probably a good tip in most conversations anyway, right? Listen with the idea of gaining understanding, rather than the desire to